new speaker the other night with some friends, and I just had to make sure that all worked for them so they could hear me. I hope all of you can hear me. Is everybody, people are nodding, good. All right, so I've been very active in that church, and so that's the church that I continue to be a member at. And, I mean, I've been on deacons, I've been chair deacons, I've been on facilities, I've been doing music with guitar playing and stuff like that. So very involved in the East Area Church. A little bit more about who I am. So, as you can see, we have one son here today. We have another one who's a little bit older, 23. So we've been raising these boys and learning about what that means. My God, what a challenge. And to get away from that challenge, I go to work every day. I work as an engineer. I actually have a math degree. I don't normally do this preaching stuff, but I do speak in front of groups sometimes. I have a math degree from Penn State, and met another friend from Pennsylvania over here. And the work I do is I'm an engineer. I design women's medical products. What does that mean? So electronics and software for doing surgeries that you only do on women. Certain irony in that, but we'll get to that later. So that's a little bit about what I do. I've been doing that for over 30 years. I worked at a company called Hologic. Just about every woman in this place has been touched by Hologic products. They do pap smears, actually we do all the blood screening for HIV for the entire country. So if you've ever gotten blood or given blood, Hologic is involved in that. That's my company. So it's kind of cool. And it's really neat because we get to help people. And I really like doing that. So the reason I came out here today and drove over from East Area instead of sleeping late and having an extra cup of coffee was to hopefully present to you a little bit about what it is to be transgender. So poll here real quick. Who here, I would say, is close to a person that is transgender? Okay, cool, we got a few. Who here has never met anyone that's transgender besides this morning? Oh, yeah, a couple, right? Yeah. Actually, you probably have, you just didn't know it. But that counts, I mean, because that's really part of the whole thing here, is understanding that people are around us, we just don't always know it. And wouldn't it be great if the church was a place where they could be known for who they are? So, actually I have this nice outline here, I just have to remember to use it. So, a little bit about what it means to be transgender. So obviously people who are familiar with this and have read about it and tried to comprehend it, there's some good books out there, they've come to understand that being transgender is about gender. It's not about sex. L, G, and B are about basically who you're attracted to. T, well, that's a separate issue. I mean, we're all attracted, most of us are attracted to somebody, right? But T is not about who you're attracted to, it's who you are. So I realized this when I was about 5. So long before I guess I had any idea about sex. It was like when I was first figuring out even that there's a difference in genders. I knew I was a girl. I mean, that's what I told my parents. And I remember getting punished for wearing a skirt around the house because, you know, when you grow up in a little tiny town in rural Pennsylvania, you don't do that when you're supposed to be a boy. I mean, you don't do that. You don't, especially the pastor's kid. You know, I don't know what pastor's kids are like today, but I can tell you back then, we were supposed to look good even if we were raising hell. But we had to look good and we had to fit the mold. And you know, it was a funny time because in, I don't know, San Francisco and New York, there was all kinds of wild stuff going on. And I think it probably even made conservative US even more conservative, like even more protective. Don't deviate from the norm. That's bad, right? All the different things that people were experimenting with, and one of them was sex. And no, you don't do that here. Not in little town Pennsylvania. Very German area, great people. But yeah, that was scary. And so my parents honestly did exactly what they needed to do. They needed to give me the skills to live in this world today. And frankly, that meant learning to be a boy. Boy, I hated that. I hated it from day one. As soon as I figured out this is what I had to do. Well, and so I rebelled a little bit, and they pushed back even harder. And basically made me feel like they hated that person that I really wanted to be. Maybe they hated this person. I was okay if I acted like that good boy over there. And I learned to do all the boy things. Go fishing, go hunting, do Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, all those things. I learned to do all those things. Actually, I'm pretty good at it. Dad used to take me off to the hunting cabin. I don't know if people still do that these days, but in Pennsylvania, going deer hunting and going off to the cabin with all the guys for a couple of days was an annual thing, and I had to go along and do that and learn how to be a guy. And I learned it pretty well. I mean, I faked it out for 40, 50 years. People were convinced I was just a normal guy. Well, most of the time. Because what was going on in here was, no, I'm not a normal guy. Hang on, time out. There's something totally different in here that I was hiding and stressed me out all the time. Because every once in a while I'd slip up. I'd do something that was way feminine. And the guys around me were like, whoa, I don't want to be near that person. You're weird. But of course the women were looking at me differently. The girls, they were like, this person's a little weird now too, because I didn't fit in. And so it was a really hard thing. And that was kind of, all through my childhood and teen years and college. Oh my gosh, college was even worse. When you're 24/7 with a bunch of people, and they're all kind of looking for what's wrong with you so that they can look better, I think. I don't know. That's what it feels like sometimes. You don't want to ever stand out in a bad way. You want to fit in. You want to belong, right? And I wasn't very good at that. So a little bit more about that was kind of where I was. That's kind of what I was growing up with. I'm not sure all of you really understand what being transgender means. I kind of go off into what's wrong with it there, but being transgender really means that this is a girl that happened to have a male body. I mean, I'm 6'2", I played high school football. I could do the whole male thing if I wanted to. And I didn't want to, but I did, because that's how I fit in. But the whole time, there was this female sense inside me. And now some people have trouble with that. They're like, come on, if you got a male body, you just got to be a guy, right? You're a typical guy. What's wrong with that? But at the same time, we see kids grow up, and by the time they're 4 or 5, girls are typically girls. Boys are typically boys. Not that there isn't sometimes they cross and they share some things and they're still figuring life out. But girls are girls, and they're born with a certain nature, and typically. And it's not strict, and there's no hard guidelines to this. Fortunately, we have some continuum now. We're starting to see the world as a little more continuum. But I tell you, I fit into the typical girl mold really well. Just the fact that I happen to have male genitals. That's a hard thing, because then you know you don't fit in. And you know that people aren't going to let you fit in. And they don't really want you to be that way unless you mold, you adapt, you play the game, right? And so that's a lot of what I had to do. So what can be done about this? Well, these days, there's a lot being done about this. Children are being identified at an early age. I wasn't identified until I was nearly 50. And it was a lot harder. But I've gone through medical treatment. I've taken medicine, and I've had surgery. Actually, in New Hampshire, state of New Hampshire, you actually have to have surgery if you want to get that little M on your driver's license turned into an F. I have an F on mine. Thank you. That was a beautiful thing for me to finally get to the point where I had gotten through enough medical hoops that the government would say, okay, we'll let you be a female now. And also that surgically I could appear as a female if anybody ever sees that part of me, which I never let anybody see anyway, because I'm not sure why it's such a big deal, but that's enough about that. We can talk more about stuff like that if you want to afterwards. But I've gone through that sort of medical procedures to get to a point where I feel really good about this, and who I am, and how I present, and how I can be in the world, except then I still need this other piece, which is the acceptance. We are social beings. We talk. We hang out with each other. We want to be with each other. We want to belong together in groups. And the other part of this is community. And so it's so valuable to have a family, an immediate family, that is supportive of me, It has been awesome and amazing, and I'll hopefully talk to you afterwards, the luncheon, that you can find out just how awesome they are. But then to have the board, my family, my brother, my sisters, my mother, kind of reject me, They sent me the letter telling me I was going to hell, okay, to be blunt. You know, they are much more conservative. They've decided that religiously I am the most powerful sinner. I might be, that's another story. But that's not because I'm transgender, I'm convinced. You know, we are all sinners. But let me get into that a little bit too. Getting to acceptance for me, Getting to acceptance started with me accepting this, and me understanding what this meant, and figuring out how I was going to deal with being 6'2" and size 13 feet, and trying to pass as a female, and live in the world, and go to work, and have a family, and all that. And actually, it's going pretty well. But I had to accept that. And then I also had to figure out how God was going to accept that. I knew my extended family wasn't going to accept it. Like, we passed on them a long time ago. But I really needed to understand, for me, how is God going to deal with this? How did God view this? Because you know something, I was raised, even though my dad was a UCC pastor, it was a pretty conservative area. You know, and that culture, even back then, that culture was, I mean, one of the best ways to get a joke in TV or movies was to put a guy in a dress, right? Everybody laughed at that stuff. We still do. I grew up watching TV shows like MASH, where, hey, there was this one guy, Klinger, who was always in a dress, and everybody laughed at him. It wasn't a great joke. And Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman and all these other people have done movies like that. We all laugh at that. And all the time I was thinking, yeah, but that's me. That's who you're laughing at. So our whole society was taught that this was wrong. Actually, I was taught that anybody who did something a little different, gender, sexually wise, was a pervert. You know, they were like horrible. And that's what I thought my label was. So I had to go back to the Bible. You know, the good thing was my dad was a UCC pastor. I had heard a lot about the Bible, right? So I wasn't afraid to dig into it and take a look at it. And the scripture we read today is one of my favorites. A eunuch. A eunuch, somebody who was surgically altered, probably against their will, to have their genitals mutilated. Right, that doesn't sound like fun. And you know, if you listen to the story, I mean, we think of the characters in the story. We think of two of them, right? You know, you got, what was one? Philip and the eunuch. Doesn't even get a name, just the eunuch, right? So I went back to the Bible, and I've come to a kind of a different way to look at scriptures. Why not? Who is the most important character in that story? In my opinion, it's God. God sent Philip. God heard the eunuch praying. God knew that these two had to get together. God made it happen. God reached out to this person who was different, and you know, that we would often make fun of in this world today. And God reached out to them and said, this person is special. This person needs care. They need love. Awesome. That kind of thing touched me. It made me feel like, wow, God can maybe love me, even though I'm a little different. And I don't always look quite the part, but I know I am. But I also knew I needed to be healed, right? One of my favorite stories about healing in the Bible, Jesus healing the man born blind. And that was really important to me too, because, and they even questioned Jesus about this story. We didn't read the scripture today, but you guys all know the story. Jesus heals this man, he's born blind, and everybody questions, you know, who is this guy who's healing somebody? And he did it on the Sabbath too, so the Pharisees were really up in arms about that. And here's this man, and then they started saying, well, what's wrong here? How is this man born blind? What happened? And they were trying to figure out whose fault it was. Who sinned that the man was born blind. Remember that part of the story? I hope you guys do this next week. It'd be a good one to cover. Anyway, and Jesus said nobody sinned that he was born blind. He was just born that way. And I said, yep, that's me. I was just born this way. It wasn't because of anything. It just happened. You know, unfortunately, sadly, we know this happens in the world, right? I mean, there was a kid on the news just 2 weeks ago in China who was born with like 16 fingers and 15 toes or something like that. You're like, how does that happen? I don't know, but it wasn't sin. It's some weird thing that happened, and unfortunately, this kid needs some surgery to fix it, and once they have the surgery, hopefully they'll be okay, and that'll be great, and you know something? That's me. I needed some medical treatment to solve the problem. And God sent that healing to me. If I had the time, I would tell you about various miracles that happened over the last 5 or 6 years. Amazing things where God reached out, knew my plight, just like the eunuch, sent me help that I needed, gave me a loving family, and pulled off a miracle. So what does this mean for you guys? Sorry, you have a part of this whole thing too. You've taken a big step 5 years ago to become part of the LNA family. My church only did it 2 years ago when we hired a lesbian minister. We're way behind you guys. So I'm really glad you guys did this, but there's a couple of things I just want to say, real quick. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of someone who looks different. Don't be afraid of walking up to them and saying, how are you doing today? Just asking them simple things. Let them say as much or as little as they want to talk about. Be open, just be there, just be community. Include them. Just like I'm being included today. Some churches struggle with that. You know, that person's a little different. Do we really need to invite them to the women's retreat? Actually, you do. Sorry, you do. You know, do we really need to, should we really ask them to serve on deacons or something? Yeah, don't ask me. I did that twice already. I'm tired of that. But you can't ask me to do other things. I do music in my church, and I love it when people ask. I help out with the sound system there and stuff like that. So we have a role to play, and we can support you just as you support us. We just want to be part of the family. Because at the end of the day, it's just about belonging. Where do we belong? I feel like I belong in God's family. Just like all of you do. And I bet nobody here is perfect. I mean, it is Keene. I've heard this morning that Keene is the epicenter of the universe. I just was told that this morning. So maybe somebody here actually is perfect, but for all the rest of you, none of us are. But we are perfected by God's love. And I think we all belong to Him. And I thank you for welcoming me this morning.
And Danny, thank you for being here and for sharing some of your story and for, dare I say, meeting us where we are on the road, being our Philip for the morning. So thank you so much for being here and sharing that. I appreciate it. Friends, why don't we all rise as we're able and join together in singing hymn number 541, Here I Am.